Hello, Chris Yates with Huddle Productions. We are in the huddle with Antonio Williams, who is always one of my favorite guests. Thank you for joining us, by the way. Um, Nike executive, he was with ESPN, and more importantly, with the topic we're going to talk about, the NBA, he was an NBA scout. We're going to get into all the difficulties the NBA is going to deal with, but right now, I just want to talk about this. NBA is back. As a fan, are you excited?
I'm very excited. I'm very excited. I think we need some live games. There's only so much of the kind of tape delay games or the games that we watched that we saw 15 years ago. But things that I saw, Chris, that again, as a scout, that made me very excited. I remember I was watching the North Carolina Maryland game, and I saw the great Len Bias, and it made
Oh,
me think
man.
about what if and
Right.
what could have been, what should have been. And so, those are all things that I really think about. But no, I'm glad that we have some live games for sure.
Now, you've talked about this already. I'd like to hear your opinion again. The NBA is going in a bubble. They feel like they can pull this off. If you were a player, would you go or would you opt out?
I would honestly, if I'm giving this my complete honest opinion, I would probably opt out.
Even with the kind
Uh,
of money they're going to pay you?
I would probably opt out
Why is that?
because when you think about it from a revenue standpoint, they're only playing 8 games, so you're getting those checks for those 8 games. Now, when you start going in and you get into the playoffs, Chris, like the money that comes out is just the shares that you get from your playoff share. Your salary, once the playoff starts, your salary is already paid out for the year.
Okay.
And so from that standpoint, and the other thing, the uncertain things from a health standpoint with having a family, I would really take heed to those and really think about those. Rudy Gobert just a few days ago, maybe about a week or so ago, actually said that he didn't have a sense of smell after being diagnosed
Wow.
and cleared months ago. So, that makes me
Wow.
think, how is his breathing? So for the guys that have tested positive in this, how will they come back? What does that mean? Is he still, because he can't breathe, is that a symptom showing that maybe he can still pass this on to other people? Those are all
Right.
things that we don't know. And those are all things that I think you would have to consider. But having said that, in this uncertain time, Chris, I can't pass judgment on any player that says, yes, for certain, I'm going to play, or yes, for certain, I'm not going to play. I don't think there's an aisle here.
I will say this about the NBA, they're pretty organized. Adam Silver is one of the best commissioners in all of pro sports, in my
No
opinion.
question.
Um, and they spent over $150 million to figure out this bubble situation in Orlando.
Hmm.
Uh, but he even admitted, we're going to try it. We don't know if the season is going to end. Like it may just
Right.
cancel.
Right.
Do you think it'll finish out? Do you think there'll be a champion, or you think that this is going to be a disaster? Do you think this is going to work? Disaster or work?
It's funny. I think they're going to exhaust every option to try and make this work. I think it'll ultimately also depend on how many players. I mean, we don't know how many players that are, once we start playing, that as they were testing when they first got into the bubble, they didn't exhibit anything that said they were positive. And then once we start playing, now they're positive.
Right.
I just
And so what
so
happens then? They get kicked off the team?
so they'll have to quarantine and be away from the
It's almost like an
team and
injury. It's almost like an
what.
injury.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
So with that being said, we can't predict that. I think they're going to do everything they can to try to have some sort of conclusion to this season. And I trust that the Players Association and the league as well are both of those entities are doing everything that they possibly can to act in the best interest of the players. But again, is this thing sort of, there's a high level of predictability with COVID-19. So with
Yeah.
that being said, I just don't. I It's hard to say. It's hard to say if it will
They
stop.
must feel pretty confident though, the fact that they're doing this. Like if there was, I don't want to say any risk. Obviously there's a risk, but they must feel pretty confident that they're putting all these players and teams in, I don't want to say jeopardy, but it kind of is.
Right, right. Yes, and I think they are acting as much as possible. They're acting in the best interest of the players, and to say that revenue is sort of driving this decision, I think to a certain extent it is, Chris, because earlier in the season there are two bookends that cause revenue loss. Earlier in the season, we had the controversial Daryl Morey tweet about China
I
and
remember
Hong
that.
Kong, right? So that led to a significant loss in revenue for the NBA, and now that's bookend by the coronavirus pandemic.
Right.
So there have been some serious events that led to a loss in revenue for the league, and they're trying to recoup some of that revenue because the other thing you have to look at from a
Revenue drives a
sponsor.
lot of decisions in life.
It drives a lot, Chris. And then and when you look at it now, when you look at the NBA, if we were in a traditional part of the season, right now we would be in the NBA finals. It'd be just
Right.
ending, right? We'd be getting ready for summer league and free agency. So when you start looking at when the season was suspended, that was prime real estate for the NBA to leverage their platform of commanding the American sports conscious. So what they would do is leverage that with sponsors and partners and make them pay a premium to be associated with the league at the time where the league was commanding the American sports conscious. So that's a loss in revenue because while we were at the prime time for the league to command the American sports conscious, the league was actually suspended in play.
Yeah.
So so they're trying to recoup some of that revenue, and I certainly understand the decision, and I can't criticize it, but I don't know, with all of the uncertainty and all of the things that I would have to consider, I probably wouldn't play.
Right. All right. Two more things here. One is here's what's going to be interesting to me. I think sports with fans adds to the drama. There's going to be no
Yes.
home court advantage. Your number one seed is irrelevant right now because you're
Right.
not playing at home, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
one. So playing a game with no fans is going to be very strange on the players. And then two, I heard that TV is going to have to delay it. Did you hear this? They're going to have to
Yes.
delay it because the players talk trash and do cuss words, and they're going to delay the broadcast. So talk about those 2 points: playing without fans and then playing the delay. How much trash talking actually goes on in games?
A lot. And we are the beneficiaries of that great theater as fans. So there's a lot. And you don't want, Chris, you don't want players to have to worry about their brands and the things that are being said while they're playing, because now they're not instinctive as they're playing. Right. And they're thinking about, I can't say this, I can't. So you don't want players to have to do that. And so, one of the things that's interesting to me is you talk about players being true to themselves. And Joel Embiid earlier this year, after the Sixers were eliminated from the playoffs last year on that heartbreaker by Kawhi, Joel Embiid said, I'm going to come back this year and have a more serious approach. I'm not going to agitate the away fans. I'm not going to rile up the home fans. I'm just going to kind of be serious. And he actually figured out, Chris, that approach actually doesn't work for him.
And if it's not your personality, you can't play that way.
Exactly.
That's why I'm really interested to see, like, some players really play better when the crowd's going nuts and the fans are cheering them on. Well, there's not going to be any fans. So are they going to have that same, I don't want to say motivation, but are they going to have the same energy playing with no fans?
Yes, it'll be very interesting. I know for me, one of the things as a player, Chris, that I love the most is actually playing on the road and making a big play and then sort of panning the crowd, not looking at one individual, but just taking a collective kind of survey of the crowd and seeing you actually be responsible for taking the proverbial air out of the building.
That's great.
That was something
that's almost better than a home court advantage in a way.
It's no question. I was very much addicted to that.
That's
and,
awesome.
and so not to have that experience is something that I think the fans are going to have, the players are going to have to get used to.
Right.
Especially those players like a Kawhi or a LeBron, where a Giannis, where
Yeah.
whether they're playing at home or on the road, it is a packed house every night,
Yeah.
right? And so
It's gonna
I
be
think
weird, man.
it's going to
Wearing
be so
sneakers and
weird.
empty stadium.
It's going to be so
Like,
weird
I
for
want
a
to see that.
game.
I bet, but I will say this: I bet you the ratings in the first few games are going to be astronomical.
No question. It's no doubt about that. And so the
Like
NBA
they'll have
wants
the
to
best
take it.
NBA regular season ratings of all time.
Yes. And so they want to take advantage of that. And they
Yeah.
don't want to miss that opportunity, especially given that they have lost the revenue that they've lost in the WNBA as well, where it's they finally just negotiated a new collective bargaining agreement. And here it is, the first year that we finally have this new CBA for them. And now we're in a pandemic. It's just so odd.
Yeah. The
Uh,
so two more things. All right. So now let's get into. We've already talked about COVID. We've talked about how hard it is. Let's talk
yes.
about actually who can win this darn thing. Obviously, the Lakers and the Clippers, but we live in Dallas. Dallas fans want to hear, do the Dallas Mavericks, I'm not saying they're going to win the NBA championship, but could they win an NBA series? And my question is, I think if Porzingis and Luca had more than a year to work together, like if they were in year three together, how bad of a break is it that they haven't had time to really, they haven't had even a full season to kind of mesh? Is that important?
No, it's very important when you have two players that are playing off a feel, and both
Yeah,
of them have a high.
and they're
Um,
great players.
they're great players. They have a great feel for the game, but that continuity and that cohesion is
That's what
needed.
I thought.
And Porzingis was actually out for an extended amount of time as the
Yeah,
season started.
that's what I'm
So
saying.
they,
They haven't
yeah,
even had a full season at all.
no. So, so with him being out, then we have this suspension of play. And he was sort of coming
Right.
into his own with Luca right when play stopped.
I
And
know. Yeah.
yeah.
But
It's
can they
some,
do anything in this thing? Can they?
well, you know what? It's so funny. I think when you go back to, you look at in 1999 when the Knicks played the Spurs in the finals and the Spurs won, and the Knicks were an 8 seed and made it all
They
the way
were an
to the
eight seed?
finals. They were an 8 seed,
I
but
can't believe that. I did
they were
not
an 8
realize that.
seed. Yes,
Wow.
with that Allen Houston, Latrell
Wow.
Sprewell, Larry Johnson, they were an 8 seed. And
I had no
I'm
idea.
referencing I'm referencing that, Chris, because because there was a lockout shortened season. So we had all of these wacky things happening in the playoffs,
That's
right?
right. Okay.
So
Okay.
with this suspension in play, you now, not saying that the Mavs, if they have their full collection of talent, not saying that they need some wacky things to happen for them to win a series, but this plays in their favor because some wacky things can happen when you only have 8 games to, these 8 games that these teams are playing to get ready for the playoffs. There are a lot of questions that some of these teams have to answer from a
Right.
rotational standpoint. So it gives you an opportunity to knock off a team in the playoffs that
Okay.
otherwise, under normal circumstances, you may not knock off.
All right. Who are you
So
picking? Who, if you had to pick the finals, who is it?
if I pick the finals today,
Yeah.
I'm going, I would have to say it would be the Clippers.
Really? Over the Lakers?
I would have to say the Clippers because the Lakers there were some things that they needed to figure out before the season was
Okay. All right.
suspended, and then
Now
losing
we're listening
Avery
to an NBA
Bradley.
scout here, fans. This is an NBA scout, so he knows his stuff. Okay. The
Yes, yeah,
Clippers and who
thank you.
else?
I would say the Clippers and the Bucks.
Okay. And who wins it all?
The Clippers.
Wow. The
The
other LA
Clippers.
team. Okay. Last thing. We have to end with this. This just came down literally an hour ago. The NBA announced that they want to put something on the back of jerseys like Black Lives Matter and Hear Me Now and I Can't Breathe. And players can pick the slogans. And there's a lot of different slogans. Hey, what do you think about this? And do you think a lot of players will do it?
I do think a lot of the players will do it. I think that given the time that we're in this country, I think that level of awareness is appropriate. Also, too, I will say this: even with that level of awareness and having that awareness heightened, the issues and the focus has to be on the real issues as well. To take this to a football reference, the Redskins are now thinking about, the Washington team are thinking about changing their name now. And it's, as much as the social pressures and things of that nature played a part in it, what really drove the discussion and what really is driving the decision is the economic impact of the Redskins losing the Washington team losing sponsors. That's what's driving this.
So FedEx with that being talking to him about it.
Exactly. And on in NFL, the Nike is the NFL sponsor, and with Nike being the NFL sponsor, if you go on Nike's website, there's no Washington NFL team merchandise on the Nike website now, and they are the NFL sponsor. So, so with that being said, the economic impact is the reason that is really driving the change. So having these social statements and talking, Chris, about social change, that's needed. But we also have to make sure that the real issues and the things that really have the impact don't lose that steam, and we don't lose focus, because now you have some names on a jersey, and it's the economic things. Though. Yes,
I think it's a cool concept to put that stuff. It is. And what I like about it is they're not telling me to put a certain slogan. They're giving them, and there's quite a different options. So each player can pick what they want to say to give the message out. To me, that's pretty cool, to give the players the option of what to put on their jersey.
No, it is, especially, again, given the climate and the things. It's very appropriate, given what's going on now in the country and how we're coming back in the circumstances that we're playing under. We just have to make sure, too, that focus and all of the things that the efforts that we're seeing to make society better for everybody, that we continue to focus on those real issues.
Antonio Williams, always a pleasure, always interesting stuff. Glad the NBA's back.
So
I know you wouldn't play in it, but that's okay.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
But I will guarantee you'll be watching.
Yes, yes, I will. I will certainly be watching. And we need it to come back, but I certainly don't want it to come back at the expense of risking people's health or their lives.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll finish out. Hopefully everyone will be safe. Antonio Williams, thank you for being in the huddle. Chris Yates, Huddle Productions, thank you for joining, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.